past chairman present in this webinar, CMA Devashish Shah sir, CMA SP Padi, CMA Damodar Mishra, CCM, RCM, ST members and all other participants. Chairman CMA Himaj Mishra, Vice Chairman and Treasurer CMA Shantanu Kumar Raut sir, Secretary CMA SN Tripathi, and all other professional colleagues in the managing committee. I, CMA Shaktidhar Singh, Chairman of the PD committee, warmly welcome you all to today's webinar. Before introducing today's resource person, I would like to request officials of the chapter to play Institute Anthem as a mark of inauguration in the virtual mode.
Mr. Singh, it's your mute. Mr. Singh, it seems you're mute.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Sri Sachin Thakurji from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, and a PGDBA from IBS, Hyderabad. He has been instrumental in spreading the company operations and providing a strategic direction since its inception, leading to a phenomenal acceptance of its unique products and offering almost amongst the companies. He pioneered software solution for retirement benefit fund in industry in India. Under his leadership, the company has witnessed geographical expansion across major cities in India and also introduced leading edge IT and support solution for HR department, including payroll and retirement benefits funds, finance and treasury departments of major companies, earning a reputation for the company over the years. Prior to his entrepreneurial journey, he had a stint in debt markets with a leading investment banker. He has been an active member of NASSCOM. At present, he is the founder and CEO of SSS Solution Private Limited, Kolkata. Thank you, sir, for acceptance of our invitation.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Now comes to our second resource person, Sri Joseph Disaji, sir. Sri Joseph Disaji is a commerce graduate with LLB, DBM, CAIB Certified Associate of Indian Institute of Bankers. He has around years experience in handling the employees welfare trust with Voltas Limited, a Tata Group of company. He is currently doing as an advisor of freelance consultancies advising on PF related issues. Thank you, sir, for acceptance of our invitation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Today's topic is very much related to most of us and for our family members, which needs to be addressed relating to statutory provisions, recent amendments, and benefits thereof. Hope the session will be more interactive, and I request all of you, please put your query or question, if any, in the chat box. which will be addressed by our eminent resource person at the end of the session. Without taking much of your precious time, I would like to request our Vice Chairman, CMA Shantanu Kumar Raut sir, to give welcome address. Wishing you all a happy Xmas and prosperous New Year in advance. Stay healthy, stay safe. Jai Jagannath. Over to Shantanu sir.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Shakti sir. Good evening to all present here. Our research person, Sri Sachin Thakurji, and Sri Joseph Disaji, and all other participants assembled in today's program in virtual mode on the eve of event on terminal benefit, statutory provisions, issues and challenges. I, CMA Shantanu Kumar Raut, Vice Chairman, feel privileged to welcome you all once again. Thanks to Thakurji and Joseph ji for accepting our invitation. And also I convey thanks to Chairman PD Committee, CMA Shaktidhar Singh, for arranging such a valuable topic which will definitely be helpful to all of us today or tomorrow. Hope this will be a good learning session. For information of today's resource person, I am highlighting few lines about our Noble Institute and Bhubaneswar chapter. The Institute of Cost Accountant of India, ICAI, is a statutory body established under an Act of Parliament in the year 1959 for regulation of profession of cost and management accountants in India. The institute functions directly under the administrative control of Ministry of Corporate Affairs and Government of India to discharge its responsibility in effective manner. It is the largest management accounting body in Asia and the second largest management accounting body in the globe. The main mission of this institute is to drive the enterprise globally to creating value to stakeholders in the socio-economic context through competencies drawn from the integration of strategy, management and accounting. At present, 114 chapters functions at PAN India. Bhubaneswar chapter, established in the year 1969 for providing cost and management accounting education to the students and professional services to the member and stakeholders at Odisha. For commendable performance, this chapter has conferred consecutively 22nd times Best Chapter Award in Eastern Region, and only the chapter received Brand Building Award in PAN India. I again thank you all and wishing you a great success of this event and very happy Xmas and prosperous New Year's 2022 in advance. Pray before Almighty for all of your good health. And now I hand over the session to the Chairman PD Committee, CMA Shaktidhar Singh, to carry out the rest of the proceeding of this event. Thank you all. Namaskar.
Thank you, Shantanu sir, for brief introduction about our chapter. Now I would like to request Sri Sachin Thakurji, sir, kindly address.
Yes. Namaskar and good evening to all of you. And I once again thank ICAI Bhubaneswar chapter for having organized this session and having invited me on this forum. anthem that you played, which was heartening, that shows your inclination towards sharing of knowledge and removing of darkness. It actually shows us the way. So thank you for playing that anthem. Also heartening to see the initiatives that your chapter has taken over the last few years to get certain seminars and webinars organized. I wish ICAI Bhubaneswar chapter all the very best. To start with today, I would request Mr. Joseph Disa to make a presentation on terminal benefits, after which I will take over for the PF Act. Mr. Joseph, over to you, please.
Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to have been invited to speak at this session organized by the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, Bhubaneswar chapter. We thank you for extending this opportunity to share our thoughts on the topic terminal benefits, statutory provisions, issues and challenges. Myself, having handled the employee welfare funds, that is PF, gratuity and superannuation for nearly 3 decades in the Tata Group company, having more than 5,000 members and a corpus of above 600 crores. I am glad to share the practical knowledge gained over the years, which could help you while take up the mantle in your journey and to accomplish your task productively and professionally. I begin today's session by a famous quote of Alvin Toffler, which says, "The illiterate of 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." This is the case for every business undergoing some type of digital transformation. Life is a constant journey where we learn something new every day. Kindly give me a moment for sharing the slide with you. Let us understand what is terminal benefits and how this concept had evolved over the last century. Earlier, during the agricultural economy, there was no concept of retirement and people were working in the fields as long as they were physically fit, irrespective of their age. But the rapid industrialization has changed all this. Thus, the concept of retirement after a certain age had evolved. Since the employee had no source of income post-retirement, there was a need to accumulate certain amount of funds, either voluntarily or by compulsion. We all know that people face contingencies during their life cycle, which we have seen during the current COVID situation. Social security is provided to the members of a society against the economic and social distress caused by such contingencies. Terminal benefits refer to post-retirement employment benefits or retirement benefits like pension and lump sum payments or other post-employment benefits like insurance, medical care, etc. Thus, all forms of consideration by an entity in exchange for service rendered by employees. It is also a form of social security. Now let us see what the International Labour Organization says about the social security. The ILO defines the social security as protection which society provides for its members through a series of public measures against the economic and social distress that otherwise would be caused by the stoppage or substantial reduction of earnings resulting from sickness, maternity, employment injury, unemployment, invalidity, old age, and death, the provision of medical care, and the provision of subsidies for families. As already said, during the pandemic, we have come across all these things and seen how it has caused economic distress by closure of many establishments, and felt the importance of social security all the more. India's social security system is composed of a number of schemes and programs spread throughout a variety of laws and regulations, and it benefits to only a small portion of the organized sector, while a great deal of the Indian population is in the unorganized sector. Now let us glance through the fact sheet with reference to our own country. Here you can see India's GDP and other current data extracted from various sources. The median salary is about 29,400 rupees, and we have a labor force of 501 million out of a population of 1,300 million. The dependency ratio is 48.7%. That means 50% of the population is dependent on the other 50% working population. BPL population is about 220 million, which comes to about 15% of the total population. Due to the availability of healthcare in the remotest places, the life expectancy at birth, that is the average number of years a newborn is expected to live, is about 69.96 years, which is a healthy sign for a developing nation. Now let us discuss on the origins of the modern social security, just to give you some highlights on the origins of social security concept. Otto von Bismarck of Germany in the year 1889 applied the principle of contributory social insurance. Also in the USA, in the year 1935, the term social security was first officially used in the legislation, Social Security Act, to safeguard against risk of loss of income. Lastly, as you know, our constitution is based on the principle of welfare state. This concept was developed by the British economist Lord Beveridge in his report Freedom from Want in the year 1942. So the dimensions of social security, as already we have discussed, we could see that in order to provide benefits to individuals and households through collective mechanism and to protect low or declining living standards arising from a number of basic risks and needs. As we have discussed earlier, the benefits of social security schemes are available only to a very small segment of the organized workforce due to various reasons. About 10% of the workforce of 500 million are covered in the network of social security. Imagine the large percentage of our population who are out of this net and are deprived of these benefits even after 75 years of our independence. The social security laws may be either contributory laws or non-contributory laws. Under contributory laws, either employee or employer or both contribute a certain specified amount periodically and regularly. Various measures have been undertaken since our independence through the 5-year plans and other social security legislations to widen the social security net to our citizens, and is continuing at a faster pace. In the Provident Fund scheme, the contribution remitted regularly are invested in the government's specified bonds and other securities. The amount is repaid to the member during his retirement with interest in lump sum. Therefore, the employee will get the statutory benefit based on the laws passed by the government from time to time, and the benefit is extended to the employees accordingly. Some of the examples of contributory and non-contributory laws are Employees State Insurance Act of 1948, the Employees Provident Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act are the examples of contributory laws. The Workmen's Compensation Act, the Maternity Benefit Act, and the Payment of Gratuity Act are a few examples of non-contributory laws. Therefore, in a nutshell, we can sum up the purpose of Social Security as various schemes to give the confidence that the living standard and quality of life of an employee is not eroded by contingencies, and also the possible alleviation of poverty in the long run. Further, we can say that Social Security is a system of protection of individuals by the state, acting as an agent of the society in certain contingencies. The Government of India has divided the Social Security network into 7 branches: healthcare and medical insurance, old age retirement benefits, unemployment insurance, life and disability insurance, maternity and child care benefits, rural job guarantee, and food security. We have already seen the various aspects of Social Security and its importance in the context of India. One of the bad side effects of rapid industrialization was exploitation of labor, long working hours, and unhygienic and hazardous working conditions, child labor, absence of job security, etc., were some of the major difficulties faced. As labor was not in a dictating condition, it had to accept unfair service conditions imposed on him. There was no doubt that labor needed protection, and it was necessary to ensure some basic minimum working conditions. Therefore, various labor laws were passed to protect interests of workmen and to protect low or declining living standards. Side by side, trade union movement also took root to unite the workmen and fight for their rights. Today, you can see that the joint family concept is slowly disappearing due to the rapid industrialization and urbanization. The new concept is of nuclear families, which gives rise to the Social Security all the more. The UN in September 2000 adopted the Millennium Declaration, committing their nations to a new global partnership to reduce extreme poverty and setting out a series of time-bound targets with the deadline of 2015 that have become known as Millennium Development Goals. Shortly, we are stepping into the year 2022. How far this Millennium Declaration had succeeded is there for all of us to see. And this still remains a distant dream to achieve. Let us also have a look at our Constitution. Article 16, 19, 23, and 24, and also 41 and 42, that is, Directive Principles of State Policy, strive to attain social security to all its citizens. Article 16 gives the right of equal opportunity in the matters of public employment. Article 19 covers the topic of freedom of speech and expression. Article 23 prohibits human traffic and forced labor, and Article 24 prohibits employment of children in factories. The Directive Principles of State Policy under Article 41 directs the state to make effective provision for securing the right to work, and Article 42 provides for just and humane conditions of work and relief work, maternity relief. Constitutional commitments. India is a democratic and socialist state. It is a welfare state, as already stated, eliminate inequality and provides a decent standard of living. Fundamental rights guaranteed under the Constitution. Article 38 provides for social, economic, and political justice. Article 41 gives us provision for work, education, and assistance in case of unemployment, old age, sickness, and disablement. Article 43, state to secure work, a living wage, and a decent standard of life. Social security is implicit in fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, and the state cannot absolve itself from this responsibility. Matters connected with labor laws are covered in concurrent list 3 of 7th schedule of the Constitution. Thus, both state and central governments can pass laws in respect of labor matters. Labor legislation is mainly a benevolent or beneficial legislation. Therefore, opting out of labor legislation is not permitted. For example, a contract signed to forego PF, ESIC, or any other benefits will be a void and unenforceable contract. So far, we have discussed on the evolution of the concept of social security, legal safeguards, constitutional provisions, and many other related issues and challenges. May I request Mr. Sachin Thakkar to take us forward on some of the prominent social security legislation having widespread implications.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph, for that enlightening session. Give me a minute before I share my screen. So amongst the terminal benefits that Mr. Joseph mentioned, one of the most important one is Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952, which is what I'm going to cover now. A basic introduction of the Act. It was introduced by Parliament in 1952, and there are 3 schemes which came under being under this Act. The first and foremost was the Employees Provident Fund Scheme 1952, and then came the Employees Family Pension Scheme 1971, which now has been renamed as Employees Pension Scheme. EPS 95 is what we usually call it. Subsequently, we had the Employees Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme 1976. Okay, so these are the 3 pillars of this PF Act. If we just look at the main objectives, some of them, of course, came up in Mr. Joseph's presentation as well. But primarily it was to give the workforce who are working in the non-government sector some kind of social security. I hope you understand when this act was passed, the government job was much more secured, and any private sector job was a kind of an exploitation. That is how people used to see it. Even today, we feel that government jobs are more secure than the private sector. So, of course, in 70 years back, when this act was, this law was enacted, this philosophy was there that we need to protect people who work in the private sector. Second was to inculcate some kind of a savings habit when a person is gainfully employed in the establishment, and to ensure that he gets enough money when he retires, as well as in case of unfortunate incident of demise, his family gets that money. There was a need to bring some kind of a discipline in the saving where the employee and employer both contribute. We all know that in the PF Act, both are expected to contribute, and there is a commitment not only from the employee side, but even the employer has to contribute an equal amount, so that that corpus gains interest over or accumulates interest over a period of the employee's tenure with the company, and it is paid at the time of retirement to that employee. So with those objectives, now we see what is the applicability or to whom is it applicable. Let me tell you at least 2-3 things before we go to further slides, that I'll be using establishment, employer, company interchangeably. Okay, I'll be using employee and the member interchangeably. I'll also be using EPFO and RPFC. EPFO is Employees Provident Fund Organization and RPFC is Regional Provident Fund Commission. So while EPFO is a central concept, the Regional Provident Fund Commissioner is more local. All the compliances that you do it to the Regional Provident Fund Commissioner, who is locally available in your area to service you. So I'll be using these terms interchangeably. So any establishment which employs 20 or more employees needs to have a PF registration done. There are three kinds of employees: a direct employee, a contractual employee, or an apprentice who is not an apprentice under the Apprentice Act 1961. All of them are have a right to become a PF member, and anybody who joins the fund from the date of joining, he becomes a PF member. Earlier, there were times when this membership was 3 months and 6 months from the date of joining, but there were some exploitations by the employer, and hence the new rule came up where a member is supposed to, or an employee is supposed to become a member immediately from the date of joining the organization. Also, Jammu and Kashmir, which was excluded from this act, is now also a part of this act after Article 370 was repealed. Now we need to understand what are the special features of this PF. Why PF? Okay, or how does your provident fund money perform you or help you throughout your life? Number one, it is protected against attachment under any court, decree, or order. In case if you come up with any kind of liability or you lose a case, and you cannot be penalized with your PF amount. The PF amount needs to be paid to the member. It is eligible for exemption under Section 80C of Income Tax Act. Right now, we have a limit of 1.5 lakh under this. As and when it changes, the exemption limit will also change accordingly. The interest on employer and employee, which gets accumulated over the period, is completely tax-free. Okay, this is an important thing. This is one of the best investment avenues that we have. You earn 8.5. I'm telling 8.5 based on the last year's declared rate. But if you consider 8.5 as the post-tax return, then your actual return would be anywhere between 10 to 12%, depending upon which tax slab you belong to. Okay, so these are one of the most safest and best interest generating avenue. Withdrawals before 5 years of membership are taxable. The whole idea of PF was long-term saving. So the EPFO discourages people to withdraw their money before 5 years. If you do that, then you have to pay tax. PF can be transferred to another establishment on resignation. There is a mobility in PF corpus. If you work for company A and then you move to B, you can transfer your money from A to B. Suppose you work from A to B and then from B to C. Sitting in C, you can transfer your money from A to C and then B to C. The whole idea is that when you retire with a good corpus. And this mobility helps in building that corpus even if you change jobs over your entire career. PF interest is calculated on a monthly running balance. It is never calculated on daily basis. There is no day-wise concept. Either you get interest for the month or you do not get interest for it. There are withdrawals allowed for some specific purposes. Government understands that there are some exigencies which might be there in the member's family or at his home, and hence it has given some provision to withdraw for some reasons which we'll see in subsequent slides. Every employer having 20 or more employees need to have this code, which we mention as establishment code from the RPFC, and bring the employees under working under the establishment into the PF template. A PF member also becomes a member of EDLI scheme, and EPS membership, which is employee pension scheme membership. Earlier it was open for all, whatever be his PF wages. But now it says that anybody whose PF wages is over and above 15,000 need not become a new member. Yes, if he is an old member, when his salary was whatever, if he currently is a member, he can continue to be the EPS member. But if he is a new joinee to the PF scheme, and if his salary is above 15,000, he need not become the EPS member. So primarily they are encouraging EPS for staff who are whose basic salary is below 15,000. Let us understand the type of establishments. So there is one exempted and then there is unexempted. Let us look at the unexempted establishment first. Then you will understand the exempted establishment better. An unexempted establishment is what you see most of the companies doing. Most of the companies that you will come around are unexempted establishments. They are unexempt. They are supposed to deposit the PF and the EPS that they deduct from employee and contribute on their own with the EPFO. So there is no exemption. All the servicing of the members is being done by EPFO. That is an unexempted establishment for you. What is an exempted establishment? These are establishments who have been exempted from depositing the PF money and both employee and employer contribution to EPFO. They are expected to form their own trust run by the board of trustees. Okay, make the investments of those contributions which have come in, and ensure that to earn enough interest so that interest can be credited to the members. They are also responsible. The trust is responsible to give advances from PF to the members, as well as settle the employees' amount on their claims, either on settlement or resignation. So it works. The trust works like a mini EPFO, if I may say. There are around 1,200 to 1,400 trusts existing in India. We'll see what are the advantages, disadvantages of forming a trust. But although the management or the day-to-day administration is being handled by the board of trustees, which has a representation both from employer and employee, the EPFO has a major role in administering it, doing audits on a regular basis on this trust. So they exercise some kind of control on these trusts so that the hard saved money of the employees are not lost by some careless management. Now we'll divide the benefits in two parts. One, the benefits of the exempted trust for the employees, for the members, and the other would be for the employer. Let us look at the benefits to the employees. Easy and fast availability of advances. Of course, since it is an in-house managed fund, there's a possibility of processing your non-refundable withdrawals or advances, as we call it, much faster than EPFO. No hassles of dealing with public department. Faster transfer of accumulation of outgoing and incoming members. This is what I spoke of, transfer in and transfer out. Okay, these movements happen faster if you have your own trust. Faster settlement of final dues. When somebody comes and requests for his full and final settlement of PF dues, that can be done pretty faster compared to the EPFO. PF annual statement made available once the audits are over. And these days, of course, real-time balances are available. As I mentioned, he can actually watch his balance or review his balance at any given point of time. Having said that, let me tell you that till few years ago also, the difference between the service of a PF trust vis-a-vis the service of EPFO was humongous. There was a wide gap, which I would admit has narrowed down to a large extent. EPFO also technologically has improved upon delivery of its services. Yes, there are grievances across, but definitely what it was earlier, where it used to take months, now the settlement, etc., happens in a range of 4 to 7 days time. The advances are also, if everything is in order, gets settled very fast. So there has been a tremendous improvement in EPFO benefit, EPFO delivery of services, but the gap between the PF trust services as well as vis-a-vis the EPFO services still remains. The gap has narrowed, but there still remains the gap. What is the employee, the benefits to the employers? Okay. It is cost saving, number one. And second is their intent to give better service to their employees. Let us look at the first component, where there is a saving of 0.32% of the PF wages. Okay. Why? Because if you see the chart on the left-hand side, there is an administrative charge that an unexempted establishment needs to pay 0.5% of the PF wages. Why? Because EPFO manages the fund, etc., everything, your settlement, loan, etc., to the members. Hence, it charges 0.5% of the PF wages. Okay. In an exempted trust, you don't pay an administrative charges, but in lieu of that, you pay 0.18% of the PF wages. What is that? It is inspection charges. EPFO says that, okay, you are managing it, fair enough. But the fact that we need to monitor you, we need to come and audit you, we need to come and inspect you, there are certain charges that you need to pay. So obviously, the very basic difference between having an exempted and non-exempted establishment is this difference of 0.32% of the PF wages. It's a simple maths, and this decision rests on the number of employees. That's one, and second, on the salary that you pay. In some cases, we have seen the number of employees is 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, but the salary that is paid is too low. So they can't save much if they have an exempted trust. On the other hand, the number of employees is only 200, 300, but the salary that they pay is very high. In such case also, it may not be very feasible to have an exempted trust. Only where you have a very balanced employee strength of say 1,000, 2,000 plus employees, and a decent average salary, there you can think of having your own trust. Of course, these days having trusts and getting an exemption is not that easy, but still trusts which are sustaining itself is purely for this difference of 0.32%. This 0.32% benefit should not be seen in isolation, because when you have an exempted trust, you need to have an infra in place, you need to have a proper system in place, you need to provide computers, etc., to your the team who manages it. You need to have a team, at least 2 to 3 people who will be responsible for the management of the trust, and they will be reporting to the board of trustees. So, employer has to compare between this saving of 0.32% of the PF wages vis-a-vis the expenditure that they have for all these that I mentioned. Only then they can come to a conclusion whether having a PF trust is beneficial or not. In some cases, we have seen companies who are little employee centric. They have felt that, okay, even if our cost is more or less, the cost of running the PF trust is more or less equal to the savings that we make, even in that case, we will continue having a trust because we are able to serve our employees better. Okay. So that was the benefit for the employer. Now, rate of interest is declared annually. It is typically declared by Central Board of Trustees, which run the EPFO, and the exempted trust have to follow that. The Central Board of Trustees declare based on the earnings that they have made. The exempted trust also has to ensure that they declare a similar rate or a higher rate. They cannot declare a lower rate, even if the exempted trust has earned lesser interest. For example, the interest for the last financial year was 8.5. If one trust has earned 8%, it has still to declare 8.5. Any loss that you have will be made good by the company. If the trust makes a loss of 0.5%, okay, because of higher interest rate declared by the Central Board of Trustees and the earning being lower, then that loss has to be made good by the company. It is the exemption is given under that condition. And if you continuously run in a loss for consecutively 3 years, then there is a high chance that you will have to surrender the PF trust to the PF authorities, to the EPF. Now these funds are to be invested, only then you can actually generate a decent return and credit it to the members. There are certain guidelines given by the Ministry of Finance where you can make investments in certain sections, as you see in the chart on the right hand side: government securities, debt securities, money market instruments, equity and equity related instruments, ETF, which is exchange traded funds, and asset backed securities. Now, if you see everywhere, there is a minimum, in most of the cases, there is a minimum that you have to invest, and there is a maximum amount that is allowed. So there is a limit that is allowed. This guidance is given primarily to ensure that there is no with the PF money. Can I continue? Yeah. So this pattern, this guidance is being given so that to ensure that the money is not misutilized anywhere and is not invested in any bad securities. Okay. The trustees are not permitted to restructure, sell, withdraw the investments except in case of rating downgrade. If you have investments which goes below investment grade, I think the investment grade is either BBB or BBB plus. If it goes below that, then the trustees have the right to sell that security. Okay. The other case where you can sell your securities is shortage of funds. You have more liability in this month. You need to pay people who are moving out of your organization or somebody who has applied for withdrawals, temporary withdrawals. If you do not have enough money, if your contribution is not enough to meet those claims, then you can write to RPFC asking them to sell the securities. Okay. And along with sale of securities, there is another investment that PF trusts had made earlier, which was SDS, Special Deposit Scheme. For a long time, the PF authorities was expected to make investments in this deposit. So there is a huge amount or huge corpus, at least 30 to 40% of the overall corpus, which is still lying with SDS for almost all trusts. Mostly the older trusts which formed after 2000. I don't think they'll have anything to do in SDS, but the older trusts still carry a huge corpus in SDS. And therefore, at an earliest opportunity, when they have some shortfall of funds, they sell certain securities as well as they withdraw from SDS. And this, of course, has to be done with the permission of EPFO. Okay. This investment pattern has to be achieved at the year end. Although it has to be achieved at the year end, a prudent way of handling it is that you have to monitor it on a monthly basis so that you don't miss the bus at the year end. Okay, because typically your contribution for the month of March comes sometime for some companies on 26th, 27th of March. You have actually very less time to adjust your investments to meet these criteria. So it is always safe to actually complete your this pattern by at least January, so that last moment adjustments can be done. If you have huge shortfall in one of the categories, you will not be able to adjust it in the month of February and March. And to top it all, the investments are being monitored by RPFC on a regular basis. They have a special attention to these investments during their audits. Let us see how the contributions are made. The contribution, as we suggested, as we told you earlier, that it is made both by employee and employer. It is mostly 12% in most of the industry. In some industry, I think it is 10% as well. While the entire employee contribution of 12% goes to the corpus, in case of employer contribution, 8.33% of the PF wages, maximum up to 15,000 PF wages, is being sent for EPS, which is Employee Pension Scheme. Let me tell you with an example. If somebody's PF wages is 1 lakh rupees, then his employer contribution will be 12,000. Out of that 12,000, a certain amount has to go for EPS, employee pensions. How much? The government has specified 8.33% of the PF wages. Now, if you only go by this logic, you will arrive at 8,333 because your PF wages is 1 lakh. So 8.33% of 1 lakh is 8,333. But the government has said that the maximum PF wages that you can consider to calculate your EPS is or should be 15,000. So 8.33% of 15,000 is 1250 only. So in no case will your EPS contribution exceed 1250. Hence, your out of that 12,000 of employer contribution, 1250 goes towards EPS, employee pension scheme, given to EPFO, and the rest of the amount comes to your PF corpus. The next part is a voluntary contribution. Your voluntary contribution plus your normal contribution overall should not exceed 100% of your basic plus DA. Okay, there is a scope of, if you want to add to your voluntary contribution, a lot of people do in their organization, because as I said, this is one of the best investment option available in entire India as far as post-tax benefit returns are concerned. However, there has been a new legislation which I think you all are aware now, but let me tell you something about it. While earlier there were people who were even putting in a voluntary contribution of 50,000 per month, 60,000 per month. Okay, but all that might change a little bit going forward. Why? Very recently, government has brought this law that if your employee contribution exceeds 2.5 lakh in a financial year, so any contribution which is over and above that 2.5 lakh, whatever interest it earns is taxable, and it is to be taxed under section 194A, where a flat 10% has to be taxed on that interest. I repeat, any contribution that you make over and above 2.5 lakh, I'm saying the employee's contribution, that additional contribution, whatever interest it earns during the year, is taxable at the rate of 10%. Now, let me tell you, deliberations are going on across industries. All the tax experts are deliberating on this. There are three broad opinions. Let me tell you. Number one, people say if you have a PF trust, you can deduct it from PF trust at the rate of 10%. The second, they say that PF trust will not do it because PF trusts are only 1,200 to 1,400. What will EPFO do? Okay, so the ultimate liability lies with the employer. Employer is going to do it in their payroll. The third opinion is that neither the trust nor the employer will do it. It will be upon employee. If employee will be given a calculation on his additional contribution, PF contribution, on the portal, okay, based on that, he has to take a call if he wants to declare that additional income to his employer for deducting additional tax. Okay, because if we go by the trust where the 10% has to be deducted, what will happen is the moment that income gets added to his overall income, his tax slab could be 30%. When he goes to file his return, people are going to, the income tax authority will say that please pay penalty and interest because you have not paid advance tax. That will put almost all employees into a confused state. Okay, these are opinions. This is not my opinion. These are opinions of the industry because the tax experts are still deliberating on that. They have not yet finalized on it. So giving it to the employer, where the employer deducts it as a part of salary, is one option, where according to his tax slabs of that employee, the tax is deducted and he will not have to pay any penalty or interest. And the third option, where the employee, it is up to the employee's discretion. If he wants to declare additional income to the employer, most welcome. If not, he has to ensure that he pays advance tax or pays penalty or interest at the time of filing his returns. So this is a new twist which makes this little less attractive. Nonetheless, if you calculate overall, you will still see that up to 2.5 lakh also, if you're earning something, that earning is a decent amount. And typically the interest declared is same for both employee and employer. Last year I said it was 8.5. I just added a little bit. I took some time on this slide because this 2.5 lakh issue is a contentious issue which the entire corporates in India are deliberating. Now, the compliance part is very, very stringent. This is one of the stringent act we have, and hence any non-compliance will attract all this. Penal damages of up to 37% per annum and interest at the rate of 12% on the defaulted amount, attachment of bank accounts, realization of dues from debtors, attachment of movable and immovable properties, arrest and detention. The directors are directly responsible for such non-compliance. Action can be taken under section 406, 409 of IPC and under section 110 of Criminal Procedure Code. Prosecution under section 14 of EPF Act 1952 can also be attracted. Hence, we have seen one case where Hiranandani Group had defaulted and their directors were arrested. So there have been various such cases, but these days the organizations are taking special care in ensuring that a PF compliance is in order. Now coming to UN, Universal Account Number is similar to PAN and Aadhaar. It was introduced somewhere in 2014, in mid of 2014, and it gives a member an identity. And as I said, the mobility part where you move from one organization to other, there is a facility to carry this UN across your career, which helps the EPFO a lot because they are able to link your account very easily. And at the time of your retirement, if you look at your UN, or if EPFO member or EPFO administrator looks at your UN, he is able to see the entire history where you have worked. Okay. When this was introduced, there was a bulk registration of all employees where they were given UN number. Now, after that, the individual employee is expected to get the UN registration done. Even the employers can get the UN tagging done. Or if he is a fresh employee, they can generate a UN by going to the EPFO portal. Even bulk facility is available, but the earlier bulk facility was for all the members, existing members till that date. Now, UN is very, very important these days. To get any facility from EPFO, any kind of facility, you need to have an activated UN. So kindly keep that in mind if you work for an unexempted entity. UN activation should be your prime responsibility whenever you join an organization. Nomination. As it happens with any investments, you would like those investments, or the member would like those investments to be given to his or her near and dear ones instead in case of his demise. So there is a facility to declare a nomination through Form 2 revised. It was earlier a hard copy. These days you can make the nomination online. If you nominate more than one person, you have to mention the share against each person. Typically, the nomination has to be there has to be a member of your family. Okay, and in case if you had made a nomination and then you get married, please understand that your earlier nomination will be void. The moment you marry, you have to declare your spouse as one of the nominee there. Maybe in some of you in the audience, there could be people who are planning to get married or would have just got married. My earnest request is to pay attention to this nomination, because whatever nomination you would have given for your parents earlier stands void. As mentioned here, a fresh nomination to be made on member's marriage. A nomination can be modified by filling a fresh nomination. That can be done n number of times. And if a minor is appointed as nominee, then a major person is to be appointed as his or her guardian. And mind you, UN activation is important for this nomination. Okay. Now, the family that we usually understand the PF rules define family slightly differently. For a male member, it is his wife, his children, whether they are married or unmarried, his dependent parents, and his deceased son's widow and children. For a female member, it is her husband, her children, whether married or unmarried, her dependent parents, her husband's dependent parents, and her deceased son's widow and children. So whenever you think of family and when you're trying to put your nomination, please review this properly and don't assume that family for you means only your spouse or children or only your parents. Advances. We spoke of certain kind of advances which are allowed. EPFO or the government understands that there could be some exigencies at home for which he cannot wait till his retirement and hence he has to withdraw a certain amount. There are certain reasons for which withdrawal is allowed, like purchasing of site for construction of a dwelling house, then to build up that house, construction of house in that site, purchase a ready-made flat, okay, alteration, repairs, etc. in your existing flat or building. Finance for purchase of site. You might have taken a loan from, say, HDFC, and you have certain amount outstanding. You feel the rate that HDFC is charging is on a higher side. You can always repay that using your PF advances. That is one provision. The PF trust or the EPFO would make a direct payment to that entity where your loan is outstanding. Okay. For marriage of self, son, daughter, sister, for education of son and daughter, you are allowed to withdraw 90% of your PF corpus within 1 year of your retirement. Okay. And financing of LIC premium, etc. And COVID advances. As you would have all known by this time, government, I think sometime in April, May 2020 and April, May 2021, introduced this COVID advances, which I think was, 3 times of your basic salary or a certain percentage of your corpus. Okay. So all these rules that you see, there are eligibilities for that. It says that you have to complete 5 years of membership in some cases, 7 years of membership in some cases, and the amount of loan that is allowed in some cases, it is member contribution and company contribution both, especially in the housing and prior to retirement. Okay, and even if it is only employee contribution, there are some conditions like 36 months of his salary or available amount or applied amount, the least of the three. In some reasons, it is 24 months. In some reasons, it is 12 months. I think you'll have to go through all that. It wouldn't have been possible for me to elaborate on all those things, but there are some the restrictions or conditions under which these loans are. Settlement. Of course, when you cease the relationship with your employer for various reasons. What are those various reasons? It could be retirement. It could be permanent disability. It could be migration and from India going out to a foreign country for permanent settlement. It could be retrenchment or termination by the employer. It could be due to voluntary retirement scheme or death of the member, or it could be resignation. In all these cases, the employee has a right to get his settlement done, whether through EPFO or a PF trust. They are supposed to make your settlements done, which includes the accumulated interest over a period and all the contributions that you have made, less any advances that you have taken in between your career. The last part, which is resignation, is to be done after 2 months. Why? Because you resign maybe at the age of 40, 42. Okay. You can't just resign and the next day come and withdraw your PF. Because they say, no. You have to wait for 2 months and then declare in the form that you are no more employed anywhere and therefore you would like to withdraw your PF. Because the government wants that you continue this PF to the next organization. And I would on a personal note also suggest that if you have PF earlier somewhere accumulated, get it transferred to your current organization. And do not withdraw it unless the situation so demands. Now, transfer of PF money, as I said, The mobility factor is a decent one. Earlier, there was Form 13, which was again Form 13 revised, which was a hard copy which needed to be supplied to or submitted to the EPFO as well as the PF Trust. But these days, these transfers have become online, and it is pretty easy to apply for your transfer from your previous organization. Either your previous employer or current employer will authorize such transactions online, and your money will get transferred automatically through NEFT. This is a fantastic thing which has happened. Of course, there is a small gap there. Whenever the transfer happens from EPFO, okay, at times the trust is not aware that against whose or against which employee has the credit come. There is an annexure K which EPFO is supposed to send to these PF trusts, which at times do not come on time. So there is a confusion that if 10 lakhs have come from EPFO, you know it is a transferring money, but 30 employees in your organization have applied for transferring. So whose money it could be? Unless you get an annexure K, which is a transfer out letter, which indicates for this employee we are sending so and so, and these are the calculations, you would not know whose money it is. So there is that small gap here, but nonetheless, it is now happening online, and it has become a little more convenient than what it was earlier. Most important thing, when you think of PF, don't only look at only your regular employees, but look at your contractual employees also. We have companies where employee strength, regular employee strength is only 1,000, but the contractual employee strength is almost 5,000. Okay. Ultimate responsibility of PF compliance for these contractor employees will also lie with the employer. The contractors could be of two types. One, who will not have any code. They might have very small employee of 5 or 6 or 7 employees. They may not have a PF code. In that case, you need to take the employees of those contractor under you, make them a PF member, and comply with the statutory part. And there's another one where you have the contractor has his own PF code, and he is doing his compliance for his employees. But you, as a principal employer, need to ensure that you collect the muster cum wage register of the employees, duly paid challans, and the monthly returns that the contractor is filing on an EPFO portal. You need to have a record of that, so that when the inspector comes to you, they will ask that you have so many contractor employees and you have 100 contractors. Have you maintained a list of those compliances from each of these contractors? He may pick and choose any one contractor and may want to see the records that you have maintained for them. So mind you, I repeat, as a principal employer, the compliance liability lies on you. Annualized PF statements. Once your PF audits, etc., are over, you are expected to issue PF statements to members at by the 30th September of the next financial year. So 31st March 2021, for the period ending 31st March 2021, you are supposed to issue it by 30th September 2021. Any error that is there, you need to give some window to the employee so that he can come back and inform you that there is this discrepancy. Almost, although these days the PF balances have become on a real-time basis, but yes, the PF statement has a value because it is after the audit is done, whereas real-time balance is on a provisional basis. Okay. The forms that typically we spoke of, but I would like to highlight 3 major forms. Form 2, nomination form, which was submitted physically, but these days all is online. In some pockets where the EPFO is located in some remote area, we have seen employees complaining about, nahi, abhi bhi humko haath se wo fill up karke dena padta hai. So there are pockets, but majorly in the metro cities and large population is trying to apply for nomination online. Okay, Form 11 is a declaration form when somebody joins your organization, whether he had earlier been or not, or whether he is a fresher. If he is a fresher, then you need to create a new UN as an employer. And if he had a UN earlier, you need to tag it on the EPFO portal, so that the benefits of that earlier UN is automatically tagged with the new employment. This also is happening online. Form 13, which is, as I mentioned, for transfer and transfer out, is also happening online. But these were forms till very recently physically filled up and submitted to EPFO and the trusts. That is more or less an end of the statutory part. I would just like to tell you, take a couple of slides of what role we are playing. I represent AAA Solutions, and AAA Solutions is into this industry for the last 14 years. We specialize in applications for retirement trust funds, PF, superannuation, and gratuity. The name of the application is Providence. And we are catering to clients across India. Around 15 lakh employees PF statement comes out from Providence, and around 50,000 crore corpus of the retirement trust fund money is being managed on Providence. Okay, we just feel proud that we are one of the foremost company which has tried to bring the retirement benefit industry onto digitization. It so happened that the Central Provident Fund Commissioner in Delhi had called upon us and witnessed our product for almost 1.5 hours and appreciated it. And he's also represented me in one of the IT advisory committee that he has formed for revamping of EPFO. So all that by the God of grace. We are not boasting on anything, but this is something which most of the exempted trusts have adopted, where Providence has primarily two parts: the member part, the administrator part, and the member self-service. The administrators can manage all the transactions which we spoke of earlier, like contribution, transfer in, loan, transfer out, settlement, etc. While they do that, the accounting gets done automatically. Okay, quarterly closing, monthly closing is possible. You get balance sheet, income expenditure account, EBIT and EBIT, trial balance, along with audit ready annexures on a real-time basis. Okay, there is a provision of calculating the loan, etc., as per the EPFO criteria, which I mentioned: 24 months salary or 36 months salary, etc. Detailed PF statement is available online. A member can view his balance at any point of time, and projected surplus deficit of the trust is also a possibility, wherein if you need to pay 8.5 to your members, what could be the possible surplus or deficit to your PF trust? Okay, that capability the system has, where it can do simulation based on different rates. Okay, on the investment front, you have a YTM calculator. When you take quotations from the brokers or arrangers, you can evaluate it and generate a comparative evaluation statement for the trustees to take a call. Okay, you can invest in T-bills, term deposits, equity, MF. Okay, all kind of debt market securities are can be transacted from the system. You get a detailed cash flow report, and investment register, accrued interest, and amortization schedules are available, which are not only a part of compliance but important for your audits as well. Along with that, the returns, which are primarily electronic challan return, which is to be filled up every month and submitted to the government, as well as Appendix A, which is the receipts and payments of your trust activities, are all done from a click of a button from the system. And the last slide, the features that is there for the employee. And in this COVID time, there have been a lot of ask for this application, especially when people were sitting at home and couldn't apply physically, etc. A completely paperless mechanism to apply for loan, along with uploading of all the necessary documents for each kind of loan. That facility is available. And as and when the approver or authorizers approve the loan, the date time stamp fall on that application, and the employee is able to know the status of that application. The turnaround time has been faster with Providence, and turnaround data is also available. Now people know that can I make these settlements within 2 days or one day, etc., which earlier used to take 4 or 5 or 7 days. Member can see their YTD statement. They can print their previous year's PF statements. Okay, they can track their applications. They can download all kind of forms in PDF from the system. So it's a two-pronged application where the focus is on the admin part, but the employee has also been given an equal amount of access where he can do a lot of transactions, including his submission of his nomination, including Form 11, where he declares that I was a member of previous trust and my or EPFO and my UN number was so and so. All that can happen online with Providence. With that, I'll come to the end of this session. I thank you very much for your patient hearing. I now hand it over to Mr. Joseph, who is going to take us through EPS 95, which is an important part of our PF Act. Over to you, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Thakkar. Give me a moment as I share the screen with you. This is regarding employees pension scheme. I will quickly touch upon this scheme only on the basic aspects. Just to give a background about the employees pension scheme. The original scheme was introduced in the year 1971, which was called the Family Pension Scheme. Under that scheme, only rupees 5,000 was paid to the nominee of the deceased person, and other members were not paid any amount. Just in case of death, only the family member was paid 5,000. That was the scheme prevalent up to 15th November 1995. Government of India has modified this family pension scheme because there was no monthly pension, although the name was pension, but there was no pension was given to anyone. So with effect from 16th November 1995, the Government of India modified this entire scheme, renaming it as Employees Pension Scheme. In the new scheme, the concept of monthly pension was introduced. The scheme has undergone several changes since 1995. Initially, all PF members were eligible to become members of pension scheme, irrespective of their wages. However, at present, only if a person is drawing a basic salary, basic and DA, of less than rupees 15,000 per month, is only eligible to become a EPS member. Next, we'll see the various types of pensions eligible under this scheme. As you can see on the screen, there are different types of pensions. Superannuation pension, the eligibility is that the member should complete 58 or 60 years. Also, he should contribute for minimum 10 years. Then only he is able to apply for superannuation pension. In case of death of a member while in service, his wife and 2 children below the age of 25 years are eligible for nominee pension. The children will receive the pension till they attain the age of 25 years. The disablement pension, this is the pension given to member upon permanent total disablement during service. The reduced pension can be availed by a resigned member if he does not intend to work anywhere else or moves abroad or starts his own business. He will be eligible to apply for reduced pension after completing the age of 50 years. Pension amount reduced to at 4% for every year the age falls short of 58 years, because 58 years is the normal age when he is able to apply for pension. But here, since the member has resigned and if he has no intention to continue to work. That is why they are giving him this facility to apply for reduced pension. And this nominee pension, this is available for the unmarried person. Out of the 12% employer's share, 8.33% of the aggregate of basic plus DA up to rupees 15,000, that is a maximum of rupees 1,250, is the EPS contribution every month. Remaining amount will go to your company's PF account. The amount is transferred to the Regional Provident Fund Commissioner, which is a government authority, since the pension scheme is a government administered scheme. Now we will know the different concepts under the EPS in brief. Every employee is required to make nomination under EPS 95 scheme by filling form number 2. Now the online facility for each individual member under members individual UAN is available, and it is very important that every member should complete this without fail. The employee and his family members are eligible for pension benefits under the pension scheme. In the case of a married employee, the spouse and children below 25 years of age would be his nominees. However, in the case of an unmarried employee, his dependent parents, brothers and sisters would be his nominees. Eligibility for pension, we have already discussed on this in the earlier slide under different types of pension. However, what about an employee who leaves the service, who has worked for less than 10 years and leaves the service? Under this scenario, member has two options, either to withdraw the contribution in lump sum or apply for the scheme certificate. Now we will know a little more about a scheme certificate. If the member left the employment before attaining the age of 50 or 58 years, he may apply for scheme certificate from the RPFC. It is a document issued by RPFC, means Regional Provident Fund Commissioner, indicating the pensionable service and his salary, due date of pension, date of birth, date of leaving, family address, all his personal details are mentioned there. If he is subsequently employed in any other establishment covered under the scheme, his earlier service as per the scheme certificate will be added while calculating his pension. Member has to apply online for obtaining a scheme certificate, or he can fill up form number 10C for this purpose. Pension benefits, we have already dealt with this in the earlier slides. Now we will know in short how the pension is calculated. For those members who had joined prior to the year 1995, their pension would be calculated in two parts. One is from the date of joining till 15/11/1995, which is called past service benefit, and another is called calculated from 15/11/1995 till the date of leaving. This is called formula pension. Calculation of formula of pension is very simple. Member's pensionable salary, which is 15,000 rupees maximum, is multiplied by the number of years of service after 15/11/1995 divided by 70 is the formula. Whatever result you get by using this formula is the pension amount that will be paid to the member every month. Past service benefits are available only for those who had joined prior to 15/11/95, and the amount would be paid shown here. The service minimum service past pension payable, if the age as on 16/11/95 is 53 years or more, it is 265 fixed amount. If the age is 48 to 52 years, it is 325, and 15 to 47 years, the fixed amount is rupees 450. About life and marriage certificate. The pensioners are required to submit their life certificate and non-remarriage certificate to the bank concerned during the month of November every year. Otherwise, the pension will stop. Last but not the least, my talk will be incomplete if I do not say something on another most important terminal benefit scheme, that is EDLI scheme, which is available in case of demise of an employee. The name itself suggests that it is an insurance. Under the EDLI scheme, mostly monthly insurance premiums are paid by the employer only. Every PF subscriber is automatically entitled for the benefits of this statutory scheme in case of any eventuality. As you can see on the screen, it provides for assurance, payment of assurance benefit upon the death of the member. Minimum EDLI benefit is rupees 2,50,000 irrespective of your PF amount. Maximum EDLI benefit was 6 lakh. This has been enhanced with effect from 28th April 2021 due to many COVID deaths throughout the country. The maximum benefit is increased to 7 lakh now from earlier 6 lakhs, and this new limit will be in effect for 3 years from April 28, 2021. The benefit is calculated on the monthly wages and on average balance in the member's PF account, subject to the minimum and maximum limits. Monthly wages are capped at rupees 15,000. The benefits under the scheme are paid to the nominee if no nomination is made. His spouse, unmarried daughters, and minor sons will be the beneficiaries. With this, I end my session. I hope it was informative and also fun to learn something new, especially on the topic of terminal benefits like PF. In case you take up interest in this specialized field, I hope we have covered many of the important aspects and prominent laws in respect of today's topic, terminal benefits of an employee. Thank you all for your patient hearing. I wish each and every participant all the best in their career and conclude with a key advice of Grace Lichtenstein, which is very appropriate even today, which says, work for a cause, not for applause. Live your life to express, not to impress. Don't strive to make your presence noticed. Just make your absence felt. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your nice word and advice to our members. Thanks for your nice deliberation and by highlighting the origin and need of Social Security and EPS. Thank you, sir. Thanks to Thakurji also. He has very insightful presentation and deliberation on Provident Fund under exempted and non-exempted establishments, compliance and consuel, withdrawal of PF and various funds. He has covered all related to Provident Funds. Thank you, sir. Now the platform is open for interaction. Sir, there are some questions in chat box.
Yes, I'm seeing it. Mr. Joseph, you can also have it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I will go to them.
1 minute. Sir,
First is, I think, after being allowed 15% to be invested in ETF equity, why EPFO is struggling to pay 8.5 interest to PF, where exempted trusts are earning 9 or 10% by doing efficient fund management, by investing in blue chip companies and Nifty. If you see, you can find that LIC has increased its assets value from 30 trillion to 38 trillion within a few months, let's say 1 year, by executing better fund. So, just one thing. First of all, exempted trusts are also struggling a little bit. Not all of them are able to actually reach that 9-10%. Few of them which had old investments, they are able to maybe sustain that much. But as far as I know, and the interaction that I had with multiple trusts, they are on a borderline case. That is one fact. Second, a Of course, how well EPFO is managing its equity portfolio, we do not have much clue on that. Okay, and equity amount being a certain percentage of the overall portfolio, I think the benefit of equity will come going forward when the corpus has little more proportion of equity. Even the percentage allowed will be 15%, but over a period of time it will build up. Okay, so that is my opinion. Mr. Joseph, if you had something to add to that.
What you say is actually true, because very few companies are paying interest of 8.5% or little more than that, because up to 9.5% is exempted from income tax. If you pay more than 9.5%, then it is taxable again. So definitely the PF office is struggling to pay that even 8.5%. There are different views between Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Finance, because Ministry of Labor is trustees of Central EPFO. They pass the, they say that, pass the resolution of 8.5%, then it is sent to the Finance Ministry, then they will send it back again, back and forth. It takes a long time for them to decide this rate of interest. And definitely the PF investments are of the EPFO are managed by, they have given it to some companies, some external company. They themselves are not managing it. I think HDFC or ICICI, some funds they have given it and they are managing it on behalf of them. And we don't know why it is they are giving less returns. But the private trusts, how they are managed efficiently and there is better control. And mostly the investments they have, the private trusts are old investments and they don't invest 15%. Mostly they restrict it to the minimum of 5%. Because there is a risk also is involved, and whereas RPFC is investing full 15% on that. No doubt they have made some profits when the market boom was there, but now again it has come down. So they have to be very careful while investing. The timing, all these things are very important. That is what I can say. Because
and also just to add to that, for example, if you remember 31st March 2020 when the markets crashed, what happened was for equity, the earning is not typically by selling the shares, but it is doing a mark to market. At the point of time, they were literally struggling because in that last 15-20 days, market crashed as on 31st March 2020, right? Due to COVID. So just because the markets crashed, the mark to market valuation also fell down, and therefore the overall return could look little ordinary. Whereas if you look at the entire scenario over a longer period, I think the benefit of equity will come going forward.
Sir, actually, sir,
Yes, please.
sir.
Yes, please, sir.
Actually, out of the experience we had in
Yes.
PF trust, exempted PF trust,
Sir.
that 85% of the total corpus is invested in government security and debt fund.
Right.
And these are all long-term in nature, say 8 years or 10 years.
Right.
If you go back to that before 31st March 2020, you can find maximum investment was earning not less than 8 to 9% interest in debt and government security. Am I right? And it is still continuing. Whereas you can find less interest rate for the contribution made during the year 2020-21. That is first observation. And
Okay.
second one is ETF is a kind of fund. Even a blind man, if he will invest in ETF during the
Right.
period 2021,
Right.
still he will get not less than 100% earning
Right.
during pandemic.
Right.
That I'll cite one example. That's why I cited one example.
Yes.
Since LIC, he increased its fund value from 30 trillion
Right.
to 38 trillion. You can check their balance sheet.
Okay.
So why, my question is, why that PF fund management, that why they are struggling to pay 8 or 8.5%. Always there is a discussion and all these things. That is what we want to know. Because 8% is nowadays, okay, we are struggling that debt fund is earning 5 or 6%. But most of the fund we invested before 31st March 2020 and was used to earn not less than 8 or 9%.
See, I very slightly differ from you on one thing, that actually the bond investments, where 85% of the corpus is, has not been earning quite well, in the sense the rate of interest or the yield, rather than the rate of interest. The yields have fallen down on a continuous basis. If we see 6%, 6.5%, 7%, even some of the AAA rated paper, you might get at 7, 7.5 in some cases. So you see that there is definitely a little challenge where your entire corpus is stuck between 7, 8% to give a return which is, say, 8.5, especially for the newer trusts who didn't have that old investments. There are, as you rightly said, some old investments are there where they had bought the bonds at face value and the coupon are 12%, 11%. But those bonds are slowly maturing now because they were 20, 25-year-old bond, okay, 30-year-old bond. Those are now maturing. So I think that is one aspect. And second, your concern about the EPFO fund management, yes, that is something which we may not be able to comment as of now, because we are not privy to how they manage the funds, and that has always been a gray area. I mean, because no wonder, as Mr. Joseph said, there is 3-4 times it goes to Labour Ministry, then it goes to Finance Ministry. Finance Ministry says, no, it is very high. Labour Ministry says, no, we have to give money. That deliberation keeps on going. So I think we'll be able to comment only that much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
But thank you for bringing out this point.
Yes, thank you. Oh, wage limit revised to 21,000. PF wage limit is 15,000 still. It is not yet revised. Am I right, Mr. Thakkar?
Yeah. There were talks going on.
Yeah.
That they'll bring it at par with ESIC wages.
Yeah, ESIC it is 21,000.
Right, but for PF it is still 21.
Yes.
How do you find NPS comparing with EPS 95 as per as pension is concerned? Please brief on EDLI benefits as a PF insurance scheme.
The EDL benefit is over. Sir has explained very nicely.
Okay, thank you. Right. The EPS 95 pension, the formula I told you how to calculate a pension. Pensionable salary multiplied by number of years divided by 70 is the formula. The amount pension is fixed unless your service is above 20 years. They will add 2 years as grace. So 22 years. So this is how they calculate the pension for EPS. But NPS, it is a new scheme, and there is no proven track record how much pension they are giving. So we have yet to see. Only they are giving the very few people have started investing now, and we don't know what is its track record.
Sir, my humble submission.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, one thing, sir, EPS, we are limiting our pension to
yes.
that 15,000 wages.
1250.
Yes.
It comes to 1250. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Whereas NPS, it is a freedom on the part of individual to contribute as maximum as possible. There is no limit on it. But thing is that in NPS, a fund manager is there, and they will give liberty to the individual that slab rate are different. Suppose as per the regulation, PF regulation, that our limit to invest in equity is within 15%. If the market is rising, one individual can increase the ETF for equity investment. At the same time, reduce the debt and government security. As a result of that, what happened? At the same time, that withdrawal at the time of retirement, that tax-free withdrawal is there. up to 60% or 80% is like that. It is tax free. So, and the rest 20% you can use for pension. Like that NPS, that NPS, some benefits are there. That's why I asked that question. Why that EPS 95, they are limiting that to 1250, and why they are not increasing, and why they are not increasing their what kind of how much monthly pension to be paid, to be decided based on the market interest rate and all these things, market mechanism.
I can say that, slowly but surely they are going to eliminate this EPS 95 scheme, because see, whoever is joining now, whose salary is above 15,000 rupees, they are not members of family pension in EPS 95. So whoever are existing members only may continue, but gradually NPS will take the prominent position in our country, and EPS will slowly disappear, maybe after a few years. So,
will I just add a couple of points?
Yes, sir.
As very rightly identified by you, that the contribution of EPS 95 itself is so paltry. Okay,
Sure.
Whatever pension you will get in EPS will be so small. I mean, if you consider the cost of living index, it will stand nowhere.
Yes, sir. Rightly, you have pointed out.
Yes. So as Mr. Joseph also right now pointed out, that it is basically for the new entrants who have just started their service, or whose salary is going to the basic is going to remain under 15,000. So I think what they might be planning is that the EPS is for someone whose salary or basic wages almost in the entire life remains under 15K, or as and when it increases to 21K, below 21. Okay, because the outcome, I mean, honestly, we have all people from all sections of society, but honestly, with that pension, you can't even pay to your maid servant.
Yes, sir.
I mean, or if you put a driver, it will be very, very difficult to maintain a certain kind of living standard. Hence, the push for NPS is now more, government wants a pension society. Okay, and NPS is more of a contributory nature. Whatever you contribute, and based on whatever fund managers do out of it, okay, your NAV of your units increase, and at the time of your retirement, you have an option to buy an annuity from the corpus that you would have gathered, and there also you have a choice to which fund manager, or rather from which insurance company you would like to buy an annuity. Correct. So there is this amount of flexibility, as well as your willingness to put in more amount in that is there. And also from just one thing, it has been there for I think 7-8 years, this NPS, or maybe a little more than that. I was just going through their returns that they have given in this year. It is an average of overall corpus has given an average of 12 to 15% return over these years. Okay, the longer we go, I'm just hoping that it will give a little better return, and if we invest more there are chances that we end up getting a better pension. I mean, that is the broad.
Sir, then why, sir, in EPS 95, based on that Kerala High Court verdict and subsequently Honorable Supreme Court verdict, why that EPFO is not listening to that verdict, and why they are not lifting that 15,000 cap? What is the reason behind it?
Yeah, because
they have gone to Supreme Court. The EPFO has gone to Supreme Court, appealed against that verdict. So still it is pending there.
That bench, now they are going to sit some what is called bench of.
Yes. Last week it was there, but I think again it is postponed. The date was there last week. Again it is postponed. So people are hoping on that judgment. We have to wait and see what will happen.
No, again, this is a kind of a defined benefit, correct, Mr. Joseph? More than a defined.
Yes.
Defined benefit scheme.
Yes.
Now, just imagine. I mean, wherever people are working, there would be a superannuation fund. Superannuation fund could be contributory or defined benefit, defined contribution, defined benefit. Now, if you have the defined, most of the companies are closing the defined benefit superannuation scheme, where it was declared that you will get 50% of your last drawn salary when you retire. Okay, all that schemes now these days do not work. So in case of pension also, I am just talking as a layman, not someone who will have too much knowledge about how EPFO is functioning. But as simple as that if you suddenly from that limit of 15,000 you start accepting money on actuals, if your actual basic wage is 1 lakh, on that if you are receiving 8,333, and that also arrears with retrospective effect, they will all go. EPFO honestly will have to close out if almost all the retirees or would-be retirees come up with their retrospective money. So I think there is that concern, which is why the cases are going on. But nonetheless, to cut it short, that NPS is going to be the future. A lot of state governments have adopted it, state government PSUs, and also private sector are looking at it with some positivity. Because see, PF, what happens, half of the money you withdraw by the time you retire. And at the time of retirement, you buy something, you buy a house and use that money. Or you get your children married at that, when you are say 60, you use certain amount of that PF money and it is all gone. So what is remaining till the age we survive, 80, 70 or 90? So perhaps this NPS is a hope where if you are able to build up that corpus from an early age, and let me tell you one thing, because we did a little bit of study here, that earlier you start in this, the better it is. So all the younger colleagues that you have, please spread this, that if you start this at the age of 25, etc., this NPS, the corpus that will build up will be in crores, which otherwise they can't even imagine. A person with 25,000, they cannot expect that there is going to be a crores of rupees in his corpus. But the compounding effect is going to be humongous. So earlier they start with NPS, I think the better it is. I think we can come to the next question.
Sachin sir, Joseph sir, please on your video.
Okay.
Please.
There are 4 questions by CMA Ramashankar Mishra sir.
Right.
Sir.
Mr. Joseph.
I will do that.
Question. Yes.
Next question is please brief on EDLI benefit as PF insurance scheme, right?
So that I think it is already done when you.
The minimum amount you get is.
In case of deficit of fund, what is the procedure to be followed by both company and trust to make it good by the organization?
In case of deficit fund, what is the procedure to be followed by both company and to trust organization? The trust will arrive at the figure, what is the deficit in its income and expenditure account. And after this amount has to be, exact amount has to be paid by the company to the trust, so that the trust profit and loss account, there will not be any negative balance. Normally in the trust balance sheet is separate, they audit it, and the interest, whatever interest they earned during the year, any opening positive balance, that interest earned during the year, and interest paid to the members who are leaving the fund and also the existing members at 8.5%. So whatever the balance comes, if it is deficit or negative, that amount has to be reimbursed or made good by the company. A check should be given by the company in favor of trust. And the board of the company should approve it, board of directors of the company.
Right, and it should reflect in company audited accounts as well.
Yes, definitely. And a copy, and it should be also given to PF office along with the covering letter. When you submit the balance sheet, this fact also has to be made known to them.
And sir, second question, if in future,
if in the future the trust earns positive figure, then there is no provision to give the money back to the company. No, there is no provision, definitely.
And third is, when will it tantamount to deficit in funds in the PF trust funds If possible, give some example for easy understanding.
Yes, see, trust accounts are very simple. They have the income of the trustees mainly from interest. Whatever they are doing investments, from that, whatever income is, they get interest amount that is shown as the interest income. Then whatever expenses are mainly
Then last question is whether PF trust maintained by company are subject to actuarial valuation, and if deficit in funds will be there in the actuarial valuation, what is required to be done in books of accounts?
I think
Actuarial valuation.
we have lost Mr. Joseph, but I think he would be a better person to answer that, having run the PF trust himself. But yes, these days we have heard a lot of PF trusts getting their actuarial valuation done, even if it was not mandated, but their company auditors have asked them to get this done, and in case of any possible liability, to reflect in as a provision in the company books of accounts. So especially in the wake of last 2-3 years, there were a couple of instances in DHFL and ILFS defaulting. These demands have now grown.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now I would like to request CMA Suryanarayan Tripathi, Secretary of the chapter, please give the formal vote of thanks.
Good evening to all the participants who have extended again their support by joining in today's webinar on the theme terminal benefit, statutory provisions, issues and challenges. Respected resource person, Sri Sachin Thakur sir and Sri Joseph Disa sir and all the participants. I, CMA Suryanarayan Tripathi, Secretary of the chapter, feel grateful to extend formal vote of thanks and pray before Lord Jagannath for all the good health, happiness and prosperity along with your beloved one. On behalf of the managing committee, I put into words hearty thanks and unsung gratitude to Sri Sachin Thakur sir and Sri Joseph Disa sir for accepting our invitations, delivered and interaction on the topic, which is very much helpful to each of our participants. Thank you, sir, for your detailed deliberation, specifically to Joseph Disa sir for their deliberation on social security, contributory law, non-contributory law, needs of social securities, branches of social securities, constitutional provisions, constitutional commitments, employees pension schemes, provision of employees deposit link insurance schemes. Sir, thank you. Again, I give thanks to Thakur sir for the provision of explanation regarding the provision of PF, default in PF compliance and its consequence, open of universal account number, nomination, advances, settlement and transfer of fund, PF fund, contractor employee, PF responsibility of principal employer, annual PF statement, various form like form 2, form 11 and form 30. And sir, also thanks to educate our participant on software of PF. Thank you, sir. I extend.
Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. I extend special thanks to our chairman, CMA Himoj Mishra sir, chairman PD committee, CMA Shaktidhar Singh sir, vice chairman, CMA Santanu Kumar Raut sir, all of my professional colleagues in the managing committee and staff of the chapter for their support for arranging such a need-based program through virtual mode. Hope all the participants have learned from this new area, which is out of our core area. My sincere thanks to all the participants for their active participations and their active support to make the webinar a success one again. We hope some sort of support and cooperation in future also. With this, I hereby declare the closure of the webinar. Wish you all and your family member a happy Xmas and a memorable New Year 2022 in advance. Thank you all again for your support and cooperation. Namaskar, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Namaskar,
Thank you so much.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Dr. Raj.